When I turned 62, I threw a party for my family, hoping for a warm embrace from my loved ones. No one showed up, leaving me in an empty room with cake and loneliness. That same day, my son-in-law posted photos of everyone who was in Hawaii, with a caption about the perfect family vacation. I just smiled, but inside I was seething with rage. When they came back, I handed him the folder, and he turned pale as he looked through it. He deceived me, and my daughter, so he will pay for it. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The ricotta lasagna had gone cold for the second time. I stood in my living room at 9:15, staring at the dining table set for 6 people who would never come. Blue and silver streamers hung from the ceiling like deflated dreams, and the birthday cake sat untouched on the kitchen counter. It's happy 62nd birthday, Dennis. Message now mocking me in chocolate frosting. I'd started cooking at noon, Lacey's favorite lasagna, the recipe Margaret perfected during our early married years. Layer by layer, I'd built it with the same precision I once used designing aircraft engines. Fresh ricotta, homemade sauce, pasta sheets rolled thin as paper. The kind of care that takes time, the kind I thought my daughter still appreciated. The wine glasses had developed condensation rings on my grandmother's mahogany table. 6 place settings, complete with the good china Margaret saved for special occasions. I'd even folded the napkins into those fancy triangles Lacey admired at restaurants. The birthday candles had melted into colorful puddles, wax dripping onto the vanilla buttercream like tears. Through the thin walls, I could hear the Martinez family next door celebrating something. Children's laughter, clinking glasses, the warm hum of conversation that fills a house when people actually show up. Mrs. Martinez had waved from her garden this morning, asking if I needed help with my party preparations. "Family's coming," I told her proudly. "My daughter and her new husband." My phone sat silent on the coffee table. No missed calls, no apologetic text messages, no last-minute explanations. I'd checked it every 15 minutes since 5 o'clock, when Derek's family was supposed to arrive after their afternoon drive from Seattle. Derek had promised they would all come for our first family gathering as in-laws, a whole new extended family I'd been eager to meet, to welcome properly. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 9:30. Margaret's clock, the one her father built by hand in 1963. She used to say it kept perfect time because it was made with love. Now it just counted the minutes of my humiliation. I walked to the mantelpiece, past the framed photographs that told the story of my life. Margaret in her wedding dress, radiant and impossibly young. Lacey at 7, missing her front teeth, holding up a crayon drawing of our family. Christmas mornings when she'd wake us at dawn, bouncing on our bed until we agreed to open presents. Her college graduation, me bursting with pride as she walked across that stage in her cap and gown. When did it change? When did my weekly phone calls become burdens? When did Sunday breakfast become an obligation she could skip? The transformation had been gradual, like ice forming on a pond. One day the water runs free, the next morning it's frozen solid. I blew out the birthday candles methodically, one by one. 62 small flames extinguished with 62 quiet puffs. No wish to make, no family to cheer. Just me and the silence and the slowly cooling lasagna that nobody would ever taste. The leftover cake would feed me for a week. The wine would return to my basement, unopened, and waiting for an occasion that might never come. But something else was stirring inside me, something harder than disappointment. It felt like determination wrapped in steel wool, scratchy and uncomfortable, but undeniably strong. I settled into Margaret's old armchair, the blue velvet one she'd claimed as her reading spot. My phone felt heavier than usual as I picked it up, scrolling to Lacey's contact. Her smiling face looked back at me from the screen, a photo from last Christmas when she still hugged me goodbye. My thumb hovered over the call button. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. "Hi, Dad?" Her voice sounded different, distant, formal, like she was talking to a colleague rather than the man who taught her to ride a bicycle. "Lacey, sweetheart, I was just wondering." I know, Dad. I'm so sorry about tonight." The words came out rehearsed, mechanical. In the background I heard something that sounded suspiciously like Hawaiian music, soft and tropical. "There was an emergency at Derek's work, last-minute crisis. We completely forgot to check our calendars. I closed my eyes, trying to picture her face. Was she looking at Derek while she spoke? Was he coaching her, feeding her lines? An emergency on Saturday night. It's complicated. Derek says these real estate deals don't follow normal business hours. There it was. Derek says. When did her sentences start beginning with those two words? We're actually dealing with a priority management situation that requires our immediate attention. Priority management situation. Lacey, who used to say thingy when she couldn't remember the right word, was suddenly speaking like a corporate manual. And Derek's parents? His sister? A pause, longer than comfortable. They're helping with the situation. It's really all hands on deck right now. I walked to the kitchen, staring at the untouched lasagna. You sound tired, honey. Just stressed. Derek says we need to focus on our core family unit during challenging times. Core family unit. I remembered when she used to call us Team Gray, her and me against the world after Margaret died. Now I apparently wasn't part of any unit at all. Well, happy birthday, Dennis. She'd forgotten my middle name. Ever since she learned to talk, every birthday greeting had been, Happy birthday, Dennis Michael Gray, delivered in the same sing-song voice she'd used as a toddler. Now I was just Dennis, generic as a stranger. Thank you. My voice stayed steady, controlled. I could hear Margaret's advice from beyond the grave. Don't push when someone's pulling away. You'll only make them run further. I hope Derek's emergency resolves quickly. It will, it has to. Another pause. Dad, I should probably go. This situation really needs my full attention. The call lasted exactly 3 minutes and 47 seconds. I checked the timer after she hung up, staring at the number like it meant something. 3 years, 3 months, and 47 seconds. That's how long it took my daughter to become a stranger. I sat in the kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of my foolish optimism. The fancy napkins, the birthday decorations, the carefully prepared meal that would feed me for days. But beneath the hurt, something sharper was taking shape. Call it intuition, call it paranoia, call it the natural skepticism of a man who'd spent 40 years solving engineering problems. Derek's emergency, real estate crisis on a Saturday night, Hawaiian music in the background. For the first time in months, I walked to Margaret's old desk and opened my laptop. The screen flickered to life, showing a desktop I rarely used anymore. I typed facebook.com with 2 fingers, my engineering mind frustrated by social media interfaces I'd avoided since Margaret's death. My password attempt failed twice before I remembered. Margaret Love, 1962, the year we met. Facebook opened to a sparse feed I hadn't touched since people posted condolences after Margaret's funeral. But tonight, I had a specific mission. I typed Derek Stone into the search bar with the same methodical patience I'd once used to draft blueprints. His profile appeared first, that familiar smirk looking back at me from a professional headshot that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. His recent posts made my breath catch in my chest. Earlier today, while I was covering my untouched lasagna with aluminum foil, Derek had posted photos on Facebook, likely cross-posted from his Instagram. The location tag read, Grand Wailea Resort, Maui, Hawaii. The first photo showed him at sunset, designer swim shorts and a Mai Tai, golden light painting everything romantic and expensive. But it was the caption that made my hands start shaking. Having the most amazing family vacation, nothing beats quality time with the people who really matter. Blessed just families, Hawaii, I scrolled down. More photos loaded like evidence in a case I was building against my own family. Lacey in a red bikini I'd never seen, laughing at a poolside bar. Derek's parents in matching Hawaiian shirts, raising tropical drinks toward the camera. His sister doing yoga on a beach that looked like a postcard. 47 likes. Comments from friends saying, so jealous, and perfect family goals, and you guys deserve this. My engineering mind automatically calculated costs. 5 people, luxury resort, minimum 1 week, $8,000. Probably more with helicopter tours and couples massage, likely funded by maxing out Lacey's credit cards or borrowing from his parents' appointments that filled Derek's other recent posts. Meanwhile, he'd had Lacey lie about an emergency that prevented them from driving 20 minutes to my house for free homemade dinner. I scrolled back through Derek's timeline with the systematic thoroughness I'd once used to review technical specifications. Expensive restaurants every weekend. Designer clothes Lacey wore in photos but never mentioned buying. Ski trips to Aspen. Wine tastings in Napa Valley. A lifestyle funded by what, exactly? Derek's real estate commissions? The Instagram timestamps told the real story. They'd been in Hawaii for 3 days already. 3 days of lies while I planned my birthday celebration. 3 days of island paradise while Derek coached Lacey on how to brush off her pathetic old father. I screenshot each photo methodically, creating a digital folder labeled Family Vacation. The evidence of their deception preserved in high-resolution pixels. Derek grinning beside a helicopter. Lacey clinking glasses with his parents. The happy family I'd never be invited to join, celebrating in tropical luxury while I ate alone in my cold house. The most recent post was time-stamped, 23 minutes ago. Derek at the resort bar, another Mai Tai, another smug smile, another caption about blessed family time and making memories with the ones who matter. The ones who matter. Apparently, that was everyone except me. My phone rang, Derek's name appearing on the screen like a challenge. I stared at it for 2 full rings, watching his contact photo flash. The same arrogant smile from the Hawaii photos, but now it looked different. Predatory. Calculated. On the 3rd ring, I answered, "Dennis, listen, I need you to understand something." Derek's voice carried the easy confidence of a man lounging in paradise. Behind him, I could hear waves lapping against sand, tropical birds calling to each other, and the distant sound of Lacey's laughter mixing with clinking glasses. "I'm listening." I kept my voice neutral, controlled, let him make the first move. "Your birthday party obsession is getting pathetic, old man. Lacey doesn't need your guilt trips anymore. We're building our own family traditions now, understand?" The cruelty in his tone was casual, like he was discussing the weather. "She's got a husband now, a real life. Not some sad dinner parties where you play house with your dead wife's china. Margaret's china." He'd noticed the place settings in the photos I'd sent to Lacey, the ones where I'd proudly shown off my preparation. He was using my love against me like a weapon. "Is that right?" I walked to the mantelpiece, stopping in front of Margaret's photograph. Her eyes seemed to watch me, waiting to see how I'd handle this. "Nobody cares about your birthday, Dennis. Find some friends your own age. Join a book club or something. Stop making Lacey feel guilty for having a life." In the background, I heard Lacey's voice, faint but unmistakable. "Is that Dad?" Derek's response was dismissive, muffled as he covered the phone. "Just handle it. Just handle it." Like I was a problem to be managed, a nuisance to be dismissed. The man had turned my daughter into his personal secretary, trained to deliver scripted lies while he sipped drinks that cost more than my monthly heating bill. "Derek," I said, my voice growing steadier with each word, "you know what? You're absolutely right." Silence. He'd been expecting anger, tears, the desperate pleading of a lonely old man. Instead, he got agreement, and it clearly confused him. What?" I said, "You're right. Lacey has her own life now, her own priorities. And when you get back from Hawaii, I have a surprise for her. For both of you, actually." "What kind of surprise?" His voice had lost its cocky edge, replaced by something sharper, nervous. I could picture him sitting up straighter in his poolside chair, his Mai Tai suddenly forgotten. The background sounds of his perfect vacation seemed to fade as he focused entirely on my words. "The kind that brings families closer together, Derek. The kind that helps everyone understand exactly where they stand with each other." I paused, letting the silence stretch between us like a wire under tension. "You should enjoy the rest of your vacation, really soak up every moment. Take lots of pictures, make lots of memories." "Dennis, what the hell are you talking about?" "You'll find out when you get home. Give my love to Lacey." I hung up before he could respond, setting the phone down with the same gentle precision I'd used to set Margaret's china earlier that evening. 4 minutes and 23 seconds. That's how long it took Derek to reveal his true nature, to show me exactly what kind of man had stolen my daughter's heart. But something had shifted during our conversation, something fundamental and irreversible. I wasn't the pathetic old man crying over his empty birthday party anymore. I was Dennis Michael Gray, retired aerospace engineer, veteran of 40 years solving complex problems under pressure, and Derek Stone had just presented me with the most interesting challenge of my retirement. I opened my laptop again, this time typing Private Investigators Portland, Oregon into Google. If Derek wanted to play games with family loyalty, I'd make sure we were both playing by the same rules. The hunt was about to begin. I closed the laptop and sat back in Margaret's chair, my finger lingering on the power button like it held some kind of answer. The screen went dark, but the names and phone numbers of Portland's private investigators glowed in my memory. 5 agencies researched, cross-referenced, compared. My engineering mind had already narrowed it down to 2 finalists. But first, I needed to walk through my own house and remember what I was fighting for. The refrigerator still held Lacey's childhood artwork, faded construction paper turkeys and crayon flowers held up by magnets shaped like miniature tools. Margaret had insisted we keep them even after Lacey graduated college. "Someday she'll bring her own children here," she'd said. "They should see their mother's masterpieces." Her high school graduation photo sat on the kitchen windowsill, both of us grinning like fools. She'd insisted on that picture, wrapping her arms around my neck in a hug that lasted through 5 camera clicks. "You and me, Dad," she'd whispered in my ear. "We make a pretty good team." When had that changed? I traced the timeline backward like solving a structural problem. 6 months ago, Derek had started suggesting that Sunday brunches were couple time. 4 months ago, our father-daughter movie nights became immature, according to Derek's assessment. 3 months ago, Lacey stopped calling for advice because Derek handles our decisions now. The engagement had happened after 3 months of dating. 3 months. I'd known some of my engineering projects longer than Lacey had known her husband. The wedding planning excluded me from every major decision. "Derek thinks smaller is more intimate," Lacey had explained when I offered to help pay for a bigger venue. "Derek says traditional father roles are outdated," when I asked about walking her down the aisle. "Derek says, Derek thinks, Derek handles." In the living room, I found the Father's Day card Lacey had given me 2 months after their wedding. I'd read it once and tucked it away, too hurt to analyze it properly. Now I pulled it out with the same care I'd once used handling sensitive blueprints. "Dear Dennis," it began. Not Dad or Daddy like 27 previous Father's Day cards. "I want to express my appreciation for your parental guidance during my formative years. As I established my own nuclear family unit with Derek, I recognize the importance of maintaining appropriate boundaries while honoring our family connection." Nuclear family unit. Appropriate boundaries. Lacey, who used to write, "I love you more than ice cream and ponies combined," was suddenly composing corporate memos disguised as greeting cards. I sat in Margaret's chair and made a list, dating each change with the precision I'd once used for project timelines. The pattern emerged like a blueprint taking shape. Every alienation, every distancing, every cruel transformation corresponded with Derek's increasing influence over her life. Margaret's voice echoed in my memory. "Family doesn't abandon family, Dennis. Something's wrong if they do." She was right. My daughter hadn't become cruel overnight. She'd been coached, manipulated, systematically isolated from the father who'd raised her alone for 5 years after cancer took her mother. Derek hadn't just stolen my daughter's heart. He'd stolen her mind, her voice, her very identity. This wasn't about a missed birthday party anymore. This was about saving Lacey from a predator who'd identified her vulnerability and exploited it with surgical precision. I'd spent 30 years as a structural engineer, identifying weak points in complex systems, but investigating people required different tools than analyzing blueprints and reinforcing them before they collapsed. Derek Stone had introduced a fatal flaw into my family structure, but he'd underestimated one crucial element. I still remembered how to solve problems that others couldn't see. My phone felt solid and purposeful in my hand as I scrolled to the contact information for Cascade Investigations. The receptionist at Cascade Investigations had a voice like warm honey over steel. "Mr. Gray, Mr. Corrin can see you Friday at 2 o'clock. He'll meet you at Powell's Books, the coffee section on the 2nd floor. Look for a gentleman in a brown leather jacket carrying a copy of In Cold Blood." I spent 2 days preparing like I was heading into the most important meeting of my career. Derek's basic information went into a folder with the same organizational precision I'd once used for technical specifications. Derek Michael Stone, age 35, Pacific Northwest Realty Group, license plate 8DJ492, apartment address on Northwest 23rd Avenue that cost more than my monthly pension. Powell's books felt like neutral territory, crowded enough for privacy but public enough for safety. I found James Curran exactly where Sarah had promised, a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a detective novel. Mid-40s, steel gray hair, eyes that missed nothing. The brown leather jacket had seen better days, but his handshake was firm as a closing deal. "Mr. Gray, coffee?" He gestured toward the counter. On me, this conversation might take a while. We settled into a corner table surrounded by towering bookshelves. Karan opened a leather portfolio and pulled out a legal pad, his pen poised like a scalpel. "Tell me what's going on." I laid out the facts without emotion, the way I'd once presented engineering reports to skeptical clients. The birthday party, the Hawaiian deception, Lacey's personality transformation over 6 months of marriage, Derek's manipulative comments and controlling behavior. Karan took notes in shorthand, occasionally nodding. When I finished, he set down his pen and studied me with the intensity of a man used to separating truth from wishful thinking. "What specifically do you suspect, Mr. Gray?" "Financial manipulation, possibly infidelity, definitely psychological abuse." The words tasted bitter but necessary. My daughter has become a stranger to herself. "Are you prepared for what we might find? Sometimes the truth is worse than our worst fears." I thought about Margaret's china sitting untouched in my dining room, about Lacey's childhood drawings still clinging to my refrigerator. My daughter is in danger from a man she trusts completely. Whatever you find can't be worse than losing her forever. What's your end goal here? Revenge? Legal action? Or just information? I want my daughter back. If that requires exposing Derek Stone's true nature, then that's what we'll do. Corin flipped to a fresh page in his notepad. "Here's what I can offer. Social media monitoring, financial background checks, public records research. If necessary, surveillance during public activities. I document facts, not opinions. I won't manufacture evidence or break laws." He quoted his rates with the directness of a man comfortable with his worth. $75 per hour for research, $125 for active surveillance, $200 retainer to begin. "I'll pay $2,000 up front," I said, pulling out an envelope of cash. Margaret's cruise money, saved for a trip we'd never take together. "How long will you need?" 10 to 14 days for a comprehensive background check. If your son-in-law is hiding something significant, I'll find it." Karan's pen scratched across a pre-printed contract. "I'll need his full name, workplace, license plate, any social media handles you're aware of." I handed him Derek's information typed on a single sheet of paper. Karan reviewed it with approval. "Thorough. You'd make a good investigator yourself." "I'm an engineer. We solve problems by understanding all the variables." "Then you understand that family problems are often the most complex systems to repair." Karan slid the signed contract across the table. "I'll be in touch within 48 hours with preliminary findings." We shook hands again, and I watched him disappear into the bookstore crowd, already focused on his next move. Outside, the afternoon sun felt different, charged with purpose rather than weighted by loneliness. I sat in my Honda Civic and pulled out my phone, checking Derek's most recent Instagram post. Still in Hawaii, still posting about blessed family time, while my investigation began 3,000 miles away. The return flight was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. In my calendar app, I created a new event. Truth arrives home. The Delta Airlines app showed flight 1247 on schedule. Saturday arrival at Portland International, 3:47 p.m. I set down my phone and looked at the navy blue suit hanging in my bedroom closet, pressed and ready like armor for an approaching battle. 6 days to prepare. 6 days to transform myself from the pathetic old man Derek had mocked into someone worthy of my daughter's respect. First stop, Charlie's Barbershop on Southeast Division, where I'd been getting my hair cut for 15 years. Charlie took one look at me and shook his head. "Dennis, you look like you've been living in a cave. When's the last time you had a proper trim?" 4 months ago, maybe 5. I settled into the familiar leather chair. I need to look like someone who has his life together, Charlie. Say no more. Charlie's scissors worked with surgical precision. Job interview, new lady friend. Family reunion. Close enough to the truth. The man in the mirror looked 10 years younger when Charlie finished. Sharp lines, confident angles, the kind of haircut that suggested competence rather than depression. I tipped him $20 instead of my usual 10. At the dry cleaner, Mrs. Kim examined my navy suit with professional disapproval. Too long since you wear this. Needs pressing, minor alterations. You lose weight. Can you have it ready by Friday? For you, Mr. Gray, of course. Your wife, she always bring your clothes here. Good woman, she would want you looking sharp. Margaret would have approved of my preparation strategy. She'd always said navy blue made my eyes look strong. That confidence started with how you presented yourself to the world. I bought a new tie at Nordstrom, silk with thin silver stripes that caught the light just right. Back home, I installed a doorbell camera system I'd been putting off since Margaret's death. The instructions took 2 hours to follow properly, but my engineering background made the wiring straightforward. Now I could see who approached my house before they knocked, control the interaction from the beginning. Derek's real estate company website revealed more than he probably intended. Pacific Northwest Realty Group looked professional enough, but the online reviews told a different story. Overpromises and underdelivers, pushy sales tactics, questionable ethics. I screenshot each complaint, building a file of Derek's professional reputation. Every morning I walked 3 miles through Laurelhurst Park, building stamina and burning off nervous energy. My body felt stronger than it had in months, driven by purpose rather than weighed down by grief. I ate proper meals instead of frozen dinners, slept 8 hours instead of lying awake missing Margaret. The psychology books I checked out from Multnomah County Library made for disturbing reading. Recognizing emotional manipulation, the psychology of financial abuse, love bombing, and isolation tactics. Derek's behavior matched the textbook patterns with frightening accuracy. I practiced conversations in my bedroom mirror, rehearsing calm, measured responses to Derek's inevitable attacks. Not angry confrontation, but surgical precision. A surgeon doesn't shout at cancer cells. He removes them with steady hands and sharp instruments. My bank account could handle additional detective expenses if necessary. My calendar was clear. My house was organized like a command center. Everything clean, purposeful, ready for whatever James Karan might discover. Thursday morning, I checked the Hawaiian Airlines website one final time. Derek and Lacey's return flight remained on schedule. No delays, no changes. In 62 hours, they would be back in Portland, and the next phase of my plan would begin. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, practicing one final time. Hello, Derek. Welcome home. We need to talk. My reflection looked back with steady eyes and a confident jawline. Margaret would have been proud. My phone buzzed with a text notification. Package delivery scheduled for 2:15 p.m. today. Cascade Investigations. The evidence was arriving ahead of schedule. At exactly 2:15 p.m., a car door slammed in my driveway. Through the new doorbell camera, I watched James Karan walk up my front steps, carrying a manila envelope, thick enough to choke a horse. His expression carried the weight of difficult news. I opened the door before he could knock. Mr. Corin? Mr. Gray? He declined my invitation for coffee with a shake of his head. This isn't a social call. We need to talk. The envelope hit my dining table with the sound of Judgment Day. Karan had organized everything with colored tabs and section dividers, the kind of systematic approach that made my engineer's heart appreciate his thoroughness. Before we begin, Karan said, settling into the chair across from me, I want you to know that your instincts about Derek Stone were correct, but the reality is worse than you suspected. Section A contained Derek's financial records, legally obtained through public databases and credit monitoring services. $47,000 in credit card debt across 6 different accounts. $23,000 owed to something called Pacific Coast Gaming, which Karan explained was a casino operation with ties to debt collection agencies. 3 loan applications declined by major banks in the past 4 months. Your son-in-law is drowning, Karan explained, flipping through bank statements and credit reports. His real estate income is down 60% from last year. He's been juggling minimum payments, like a man trying to keep 12 plates spinning in the air. Section B revealed Derek's professional problems. Real estate license suspended twice for ethical violations. Currently on probation with the state regulatory board. Former clients had filed complaints about misrepresented properties and hidden commission structures. He's one violation away from losing his license permanently, Karan noted. That's probably why he rushed into marriage. He needed financial stability, fast. Section C made my hands clench into fists. Derek's dating history, recovered through social media archaeology, showed a pattern of targeting financially stable women. A previous engagement broken when his fiancée discovered his gambling problem. Text message records from his phone carrier showing communications with multiple women during his relationship with Lacey. But Section D contained the smoking gun that made everything else look like misdemeanors. I flew to Hawaii Tuesday night, Karan said, pulling out surveillance photographs. These were taken in public spaces, all legally obtained. The photos showed Derek alone at the Maui Grand Casino at 2:47 a.m., unable to resist his gambling addiction even while his family slept upstairs. Derek meeting with a woman named Tiffany Chen at the hotel bar. Photographic evidence of Derek entering and leaving the hotel elevator at suspicious hours, showing Derek accessing room 847, registered to Tiffany Chen, on 3 separate nights. 47 phone calls to Northwest Recovery Solutions during the vacation, Karan continued. That's a debt collection agency. Your son-in-law was fielding harassment calls from creditors while posting about his perfect family vacation. The final section contained transcripts of Derek's conversations with his own family, recorded through social media, messages, and email chains that Karan had accessed through Derek's professional accounts. His parents don't know about his financial problems. His sister thinks Lacey is wealthy because Derek told her you're loaded. He's been lying to everyone, not just your daughter. I reviewed each document with the methodical precision I'd once used for structural calculations. The scope of Derek's deception was breathtaking. Gambling addiction, serial financial manipulation, active infidelity, pathological lying to multiple families. This is enough evidence to open her eyes, Karan said, accepting his final payment, plus a bonus for the Hawaii work. But be prepared, Mr. Gray. Victims of manipulation often defend their manipulators initially. She might not believe you right away. After Karan left, I sat alone with the evidence folder, my phone displaying the countdown I'd set up. Derek and Lacey returned in 47 hours. I opened the folder again and began organizing the documents for maximum impact. Financial records first, to establish Derek's desperation. Professional problems second, to show his pattern of deception. Personal betrayals last, to demonstrate that his cruelty wasn't limited to me. Margaret's photo watched from the mantelpiece as I worked, her eyes seeming to approve of my methodical approach to protecting our daughter. 47 hours until truth came home. Saturday morning at 6 o'clock, I sat in Margaret's old study, arranging documents like I was preparing the most important engineering presentation of my career. The evidence folder lay open across the mahogany desk, each piece of Derek's deception organized with surgical precision. Financial records first, the $47,000 in credit card debt, the declined loan applications, the gambling debts that painted a picture of desperation. Then the professional violations, showing Derek's pattern of ethical lapses and lies to clients. The infidelity evidence would come last, after Lacey had absorbed the financial betrayal. Maximum psychological impact, minimum chance for Derek to deflect or minimize. I created tabs with the same methodical care I'd once used for technical specifications, section dividers, a timeline showing Derek's systematic manipulation of Lacey's trust, summary sheets highlighting the most damaging facts. If I only got one chance to present this case, every detail needed to be perfect. My navy suit hung pressed and ready in the bedroom, the same one Margaret had bought me for Lacey's college graduation. "You look like a proud father," she'd said that day, straightening my tie with hands that already showed the first tremors of her illness. Today I'd wear it like armor into battle for our daughter's future. I practiced my key phrases in the bathroom mirror, controlling my tone to stay factual rather than accusatory. "Derek, I have something for you. A little surprise," I mentioned. Not angry, not vindictive. just a man presenting evidence with the calm authority of someone who'd done his homework. My phone showed Flight Delta 1247 tracking information, on-time arrival at 3:47 p.m. I'd calculated the drive to PDX, parking time, terminal navigation, arrived 30 minutes early, positioned myself in baggage claim area B, where international flights discharge passengers. Public location, witnesses, security cameras. No chance for Derek to create a scene without consequences. I called Lacey at 9 o'clock Hawaiian time, maintaining perfect normalcy while arranging the pickup. "Dad!" Her voice carried the hollow brightness of someone trying too hard to sound happy. "You don't have to come get us. Derek's parents have a rental car." "Nonsense. I want to hear all about your vacation. Besides, it's the least I can do after missing your birthday celebration." A pause. In the background, I heard Derek's voice. "Tell him we'll call him tomorrow." "Actually, Dad, that would be wonderful. We land at 3:47. "I'll be there, sweetheart." After hanging up, I walked through my backyard to Margaret's memorial garden. Her ashes were scattered under the rose bush she'd planted our first spring in this house. I knelt beside the roses and spoke to her the way I had every morning since her death. "Today's the day, Maggie. I'm either going to save our daughter or lose her forever." The morning air carried the scent of her favorite, David Austin roses. "I need your strength today, your wisdom. Help me find the right words." Back inside, I made coffee using Lacey's childhood mug, the one with cartoon pandas that she'd insisted on using until age 14. A symbolic gesture, maybe, but it felt like inviting my real daughter back to breakfast. My phone buzzed with the airline notification I'd been waiting for. Flight Delta, 1247, landed. I picked up the evidence folder, checked my appearance one final time in the hallway mirror, and walked to my car. Margaret's photo sat in my wallet, right next to my driver's license. Whatever happened in the next few hours, I wouldn't face it alone. The Honda started on the first turn, reliable as always. As I backed out of my driveway, I thought about the man I'd been 2 weeks ago, the pathetic birthday victim crying over cold lasagna. That man was gone. In his place sat someone harder, smarter, more determined than Derek Stone had ever bothered to understand. The evidence folder rode shotgun like a passenger carrying justice in manila paper and colored tabs. PDX terminal buzzed with Saturday afternoon energy. Families reuniting, business travelers checking phones, the constant backdrop of rolling luggage and arrival announcements. I positioned myself near baggage claim carousel B, with clear sight lines to the international arrivals exit. The evidence folder tucked under my left arm like a briefcase full of revelations. They emerged at exactly 4:15, all 5 of them looking relaxed and tan. Derek's parents wore matching Hawaiian shirts that screamed, "Tourist," while his sister carried a woven bag probably purchased at an overpriced resort gift shop. Lacey looked beautiful but tired, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Derek walked slightly ahead of everyone, already reaching for his phone with the compulsive urgency of a man who couldn't disconnect from his problems, even in paradise. I timed my approach perfectly, intercepting them as they claimed their luggage from Carousel 3. "Welcome home, everyone!" Lacey's face lit up with genuine happiness. "Dad, you didn't have to wait so long." Her hug felt real, desperate almost, like she'd missed having someone who loved her unconditionally. Derek's greeting was performance art. "Dennis, great to see you, buddy. Thanks so much for picking us up. Really above and beyond." His handshake lasted exactly 2 seconds, his eyes already scanning the terminal exit. "We should probably get going. Long day, you know." "Actually," I said, settling my hand gently on Lacey's shoulder, "why don't we sit for a few minutes? I'd love to hear about your trip. There's a nice cafe right over there." Derek's parents exchanged glances. His mother, Ellen, looked like she wanted to object, but Derek was already herding everyone toward the exit. "We're pretty beat, Dennis. Maybe we could catch up tomorrow." "I insist." My voice carried the quiet authority I'd learned from 40 years of project management. 5 minutes. I brought something for Derek anyway. The cafe offered round tables with clear views in all directions. Perfect positioning. I chose seats that put Derek with his back to the main terminal, Lacey beside me where she could see everything, his family completing the circle like witnesses at a deposition. Derek immediately launched into vacation highlights, showing photos on his phone with the practiced enthusiasm of someone selling a fantasy. The helicopter tour was incredible. Cost a fortune, but totally worth it. And the resort spa, Lacey got the full treatment, didn't you, honey? I watched Lacey nod mechanically while Derek's mother mentioned, almost casually, Derek spent so much time on business calls, even during family dinners. He must have very demanding clients. Late night work calls, too, Derek's sister added. We hardly saw him after 10 p.m. Always handling some urgent situation. Derek's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Real estate never sleeps, you know? Especially when you're building something substantial. Speaking of building something, I said, placing the manila folder on the table between us like a peace offering. Derek, I have that surprise I mentioned, the one that brings families closer together. I slid it across the smooth calf table. Don't worry about keeping it private. Lacey should probably see this too. Derek stared at the folder like it might explode. His laugh came out forced, artificial. Dennis, what's all this? You know I'm not big on paperwork. Oh, I think you'll find this very interesting. I kept my voice conversational, grandfatherly even. Go ahead, open it. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted the cover. I watched his face change color as he recognized the first document. A credit report with his name and $47,000 in red ink. The calf? Noise seemed to fade as Derek flipped through the financial records, each page making him visibly paler. His parents leaned closer, trying to understand what had stolen their son's confidence so completely. Ellen Stone was the first to speak. Derek, honey, what are all these numbers? That's when I delivered my prepared line with the calm precision of a surgeon making the first incision. I thought Derek might want to explain those Hawaii casino receipts to his wife, and perhaps introduce Lacey to Tiffany Chen. The silence that followed was profound. Derek's hand froze halfway through turning a page. His sister stopped mid-sip of her coffee. His parents looked between their son and the documents like they were watching a car accident in slow motion. Derek looked up from the folder, his face completely drained of color, his eyes wide with the recognition that his carefully constructed world was collapsing in real time. Derek, Lacey's voice was barely above a whisper as she reached for the folder, her hands shaking. What is this? What's in that folder? Lacey's fingers trembled as she took the folder from Derek's nerveless grip. Her voice came out in a broken whisper that cut through the ambient airport noise like a prayer offered to an empty sky. Derek, what are these photos? She turned the first page with the careful deliberation of someone afraid of what they might find. The financial documents hit her first. Bank statements, credit reports, loan rejections painted in red ink and overdue stamps. $50,000? Her voice cracked on the number. Derek, we talked about being debt-free before we got married. You showed me your accounts? Derek's recovery attempt was immediate but clumsy. Lacey, sweetheart, those are investment opportunities. Strategic debt leverage. It's complicated, but gambling debts to Pacific Coast Gaming. Lacey's nursing training had taught her to read documents methodically, and she was applying that skill now. $23,000 to a casino collection agency? His parents recoiled as if the folder contained infectious disease. Ellen Stone pressed her hand to her mouth. Derek Michael, please tell me this isn't what it looks like. Derek tried to grab the folder back, but Lacey held it protectively against her chest. Those were research visits for my real estate clients. High-end properties near gaming establishments. It's complicated market analysis. At 3 a.m, I asked quietly, producing the casino surveillance photos James Curran had obtained, while your family was sleeping upstairs, thinking you had insomnia. Lacey flipped to the hotel photographs, and I watched her world shatter in real time. Images of Derek with Tiffany Chen at the resort bar, laughing intimately over tropical drinks. Hotel keycard records showing his access to room 847 on 3 separate nights. Who is she? Lacey's question came out as a breathless gasp. Derek, who is this woman you were with while I was sleeping in our room? Derek's desperation escalated into aggression. This is invasion of privacy. Your father hired some stalker to follow us on our honeymoon. Can't you see what he's doing? He's trying to destroy our marriage because he can't stand that you have a real family now. I reached into my wallet and placed James Curran's business card on the table next to the scattered evidence. Everything in that folder can be verified independently. Mr. Caron is a licensed private investigator with 20 years of law enforcement experience. Derek's mother was reading over Lacey's shoulder now, her face growing more horrified with each document. Derek, these casino receipts, you spent $1,100 in one night. Where did you get that money? And these phone records, Derek's father added, his voice thick with disappointment. 47 calls to a debt collection agency during our family vacation. Son, what have you done? Lacey found the financial analysis section, her nursing precision making her thorough, even in crisis. You used my credit cards, my savings account. Derek, we have $18,000 in debt I never knew about. Derek's final desperate play came with the artificial authority of a man used to manipulating vulnerable women. Lacey, you need to choose, right now, your husband or your father, because I won't be married to someone who lets her daddy interfere in our relationship. The ultimatum hung in the air like a challenge to everything Derek had been programming her to believe for 6 months. But something had shifted in Lacey's face, a recognition dawning like sunrise after the longest night of her life. She sat in stunned silence for several minutes, her mind processing information that contradicted months of Derek's manipulation. The wedding ring slid off her finger with ease. Weight loss from stress, I realized, and landed on the calf table next to the evidence of Derek's betrayal, with a tiny metallic sound that seemed to echo through the terminal. 6 months, she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. 6 months of marriage, and this is who you really are. Not the gambling, not even the cheating. The lies, Derek. The way you made me doubt my own father's love. Derek lunged for her arm, but I stepped between them with the reflexes of a man who'd once served his country. That's enough. Your father is a bitter old man trying to destroy our happiness. Derek's voice carried across the calf, drawing stares from other travelers. Lacey, don't let him poison you against me. Airport security was already approaching, drawn by the raised voices in obvious distress. I raised my hand to show we had everything under control, while addressing the officers with calm authority. Family discussion, gentlemen. Just settling some travel arrangements. Derek's mother grabbed her son by the shoulders, her voice sharp with maternal disappointment. Derek Michael Stone, what have you done to this family? To this sweet girl? Your father and I raised you better than this. Lacey picked up her purse and turned toward me, her face streaked with tears, but her voice steady with newfound conviction. I need to go home now, Dad. To our real home. Derek's desperation finally broke through his calculated facade, as his accusations followed us toward the terminal exit, but they sounded hollow now, the desperate protests of a man watching his carefully constructed con fall apart in public. You'll regret this, Lacey. You'll come crawling back when you realize what you've thrown away. I kept my hand gently on Lacey's shoulder as we walked away, not looking back at the man who'd stolen 6 months of my daughter's life. The evidence folder remained scattered across the calf table Derek's parents and sister left to sort through the wreckage of the son and brother they'd thought they knew. Behind us, Derek's voice cracked with the sound of a man facing consequences for the first time in his adult life. The parking garage was silent except for the distant rumble of planes overhead and the quiet sound of my daughter crying. We sat in my Honda Civic, Lacey clutching the handkerchief Margaret had embroidered with tiny forget-me-nots, while I waited for her tears to find their words. I'm so sorry, Dad. Her voice came out broken, raw with 6 months of suppressed doubt. I'm so sorry I believed him about you. About us. The drive home took 45 minutes, but we talked for what felt like hours. Lacey shared how Derek had convinced her that my love was unhealthy attachment, that grown daughters needed to establish boundaries with controlling fathers, how he'd coached her to see my Sunday brunch invitations as manipulation rather than tradition, my birthday celebration as desperate attention-seeking instead of simple love. He made me write that Father's Day card, she confessed as we pulled into my driveway. Sat right next to me at our kitchen table, editing every sentence. Said traditional sentimental language was emotionally immature. I made her favorite childhood comfort food that evening, grilled cheese sandwiches with the crust cut off and Campbell's tomato soup, the same meal I'd served when she had bad dreams or scraped knees. We sat at the kitchen table where she'd once done homework and told me about her day, reclaiming the space Derek had tried to poison with his manipulation. She noticed Margaret's coffee mug sitting in its usual spot by the window, untouched since the morning of my birthday party. Mom would have seen right through him, wouldn't she? Your mother always said family protects family, no matter what, I replied, refilling our soup bowls. She would have been proud of your courage today. Derek's harassment started within the hour. Phone calls, text messages, emails cycling between apology and threat with manic desperation. I helped Lacey block his number and social media accounts, documenting everything for the restraining order we'd file Monday morning. By Tuesday, we had a divorce attorney. By Thursday, Derek was served with papers that protected Lacey from his debts, while ensuring she recovered half their shared assets. His real estate license was permanently revoked when the state board discovered he'd falsified financial documents on loan applications. Lacey stayed in her childhood bedroom for 2 weeks, healing from the psychological damage of 6 months with a master manipulator. I took vacation time from my retirement to help her remember who she was before Derek tried to remake her in his image. The restraining order became necessary when Derek appeared at my house 3 times in 1 week, alternating between fury and desperate pleading. I calmly documented each violation while making it clear that Lacey was under my protection now. 7 months later, the divorce was final. Derek had lost his career, his credibility, and access to his victim. Court-ordered gambling addiction counseling was the price of avoiding criminal charges for financial fraud. His parents, horrified by their son's behavior, cut off the financial support that had enabled his lifestyle for years. Lacey bloomed like Margaret's roses in spring. She returned to full-time nursing, enrolled in a nurse practitioner program, and began dating Tom, a pediatric surgeon from her hospital, who treated her with the respect Derek never had. On my 63rd birthday, my house filled with laughter and genuine celebration. Lacey, Tom, 3 of her nursing school friends, the Martinez family from next door, and James Caron, who'd become an unexpected friend. Real joy, earned through surviving crisis together. As I blew out 63 candles, I caught sight of Margaret's photo, back on the mantelpiece beside a new picture from Lacey's nursing school graduation. Both of us grinning like we had when she was 7 years old, before Derek Stone ever existed in our lives. Lacey squeezed my hand as the last candle flickered out. What did you wish for, Dad? I looked around the room at the family we'd rebuilt from Derek's ashes, at the daughter who'd found her way back to herself, at the future stretching ahead of us like an uncharted blueprint waiting to be drawn. I wished your mother could see how strong and beautiful you've become, I said, but mostly I realized I don't need to wish for anything. We have everything we need right here. Margaret would have been so proud of the woman our daughter became, and the man I'd found the courage to be when it mattered most. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching. While I was having dinner at my son's house, my neighbor called me with a trembling voice. Are you home? No, I replied. Then who is in your house right now? He whispered. When I tried to leave my son's house to check on my own house, my son forbade me to do so and laughed loudly. You won't believe what he was hiding. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The door slammed against the kitchen wall with a crack that made me drop my coffee mug. Gary burst through without knocking, his leather jacket scraping against the doorframe as he stumbled forward. His bloodshot eyes darted around the room like a cornered animal's, and his trembling hands fumbled with the zipper of that worn jacket he'd owned for 15 years. Dad, I need money. The words tumbled out before he'd even caught his breath. 25,000. Tonight. I set down my half-empty mug next to the scattered mail on the kitchen table, keeping my weathered hands steady despite the shock. The evening light streaming through the window behind me cast long shadows across his disheveled face. His shirt was wrinkled, untucked, and there were dark circles under his eyes that hadn't been there last month. 25,000? I crossed my arms over my chest, feeling the familiar weight of disappointment settle in my stomach. What kind of trouble are you in now, son? Gary began pacing, his boots clicking against the hardwood floor in an erratic rhythm. He couldn't sit still, couldn't even look me in the eye. His fist cracked against the wooden table surface, making the salt shaker jump. It's complicated, okay? Some business deal went wrong, and I need to make it right. Fast. Business deal. I kept my voice level, though my jaw tightened. Or gambling debt? His face flushed red, and he spun to face me, blocking the kitchen entrance with his broad shoulders. It's not your business what it is. I just need the money, and I know you have it from selling the farm. The farm? 3 generations of Porter sweat and blood, sold last year to pay for my retirement. The money was supposed to last me through whatever years I had left, not disappear into some casino's coffers, because my 38-year-old son couldn't control himself. Gary, I moved closer to him, noting how his hands shook when he thought I wasn't looking. How much do you owe them? Them? His voice cracked on the word. I don't know what you're talking about. The people who have you this scared. The ones who sent you here at 8 o'clock on a Friday night, looking like you haven't slept in a week. He ran his fingers through his greasy hair, leaving it sticking up at odd angles. Dad, please, you don't understand. These aren't the kind of people who wait around for payment plans. I'd heard variations of this speech before. Last year it was $12,000 for a sure thing at the track. The year before, $8,000 for poker debts. Each time Gary promised it would be the last time, that he'd learned his lesson, that he was done with gambling forever. No, son. I straightened my shoulders and looked him directly in the eye. Not this time. His face went white, then red again. What do you mean, not this time? I'm your son. Which is exactly why I'm saying no. I walked to the sink, turning my back on him deliberately. Every dollar I give you disappears into some slot machine or poker game. I won't enable this anymore. Enable? The word exploded from his lips like a curse. I'm asking my father for help, and you call it enabling? I call it what it is. I turned around, gripping the edge of the counter. You're 38 years old, Gary. When are you going to stop running to Daddy every time you make a mess of your life? He stared at me for a long moment, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Then something cold crept into his expression, something I'd never seen before in my son's face. You'll regret this, old man. His voice was barely above a whisper, but the menace in it made my blood run cold. You think you're so high and mighty, sitting on all that farm money while your own son is in trouble. Well, maybe it's time someone taught you what real trouble looks like. Before I could respond, he turned and stalked toward the door, his boots heavy against the floor. The screen door banged shut behind him, and through the window I watched him climb into his battered pickup truck. The engine roared to life with a sound that rattled the kitchen windows. I stood in the doorway, watching his taillights disappear down the gravel road that led back to town. The sudden silence felt oppressive, broken only by the distant hum of cicadas and the settling sounds of the old house around me. I spent the weekend avoiding the kitchen where Friday's confrontation had taken place, keeping myself busy with yard work and small repairs around the house. Every time I walked past that doorway, I could still hear Gary's voice. You'll regret this, old man. The threat echoed in my mind as I raked leaves and checked the fence line twice, trying not to think about the cold look in my son's eyes. Monday morning found me in my favorite armchair in the living room, nursing a cup of coffee that was growing cold on the side table. The old rotary phone on its wooden stand began ringing at exactly 10:15, its shrill tone cutting through the quiet house like a blade. Hello? Dad? Gary's voice sounded different, warmer, almost cheerful. The harsh edge from Friday night had been replaced by something that reminded me of the boy he used to be. Hey, I wanted to call and apologize for the other night. I was way out of line. I paused, raising my eyebrows at no one in particular. In 38 years, Gary had never called to apologize for anything without being prompted. My grip on the phone receiver tightened. Really? This is unexpected. I know. He laughed, but it sounded forced, like he was reading from a script he'd memorized. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, and you're absolutely right. I can't keep coming to you every time I mess up. It's not fair to you. I glanced at the family photos on the mantel, pictures of Gary as a child, back when his biggest worry was whether he'd caught enough fireflies for his jar. Those days felt like a lifetime ago. We've been through this many times, son. This time will be different, I promise." The enthusiasm in his voice was almost convincing. "Actually, that's why I'm calling. Hetty and I want to have you over for dinner Wednesday night. She's making that pot roast you like, with the little potatoes. We thought it might be nice to spend some time together as a family." Hetty's pot roast was indeed excellent, and I found myself considering the offer despite my better judgment. Maybe his wife's influence was finally starting to show. She'd always been the steadier one in their marriage, the voice of reason when Gary's impulses got the better of him. "Wednesday night," I repeated, reaching for a pen from the drawer in the side table. "What time?" "6:30. We're at 142 Maple Street now. We moved last month. Remember, I told you about the new place." He hadn't told me about any new place, but I didn't correct him. "It's the blue house with the white shutters, right across from the elementary school." I wrote down the address on a napkin, noting how quickly he rattled off the details. Most people pause when giving directions to their own home, visualizing the route or double-checking house numbers in their mind. Gary spoke like he was reading from a piece of paper. "Hetty's really excited about having you over," he continued. "She keeps talking about how we need to be a real family again. You know how she is about family dinners and traditions." That much was true. Hetty had always been the one to organize holiday gatherings and birthday celebrations, usually over Gary's protests that such things were too much trouble. It was one of the things I genuinely liked about my daughter-in-law. "Well," I said slowly, staring at the address I'd written, "I suppose I could come by." "Great. That's just great, Dad. We'll see you Wednesday at 6:30. And Dad, thanks for giving me another chance. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful." The line went dead before I could respond. I sat there holding the phone, listening to the dial tone and staring at the napkin in my other hand. Something about the conversation felt rehearsed, like Gary had practiced every word before dialing my number. But then again, maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Maybe he'd finally realized he needed to put real effort into rebuilding our relationship. Maybe Hetty had convinced him to swallow his pride and make things right. I hung up the phone and looked at the address again. 142 Maple Street. The paper felt light in my fingers, but somehow the weight of the decision pressed down on my chest like a stone. The evening news droned in the background as I picked at my dinner, Gary's invitation weighing on my mind like an anchor. Every few minutes my eyes drifted to the napkin on the coffee table where I'd written the address. 142 Maple Street. Even after I'd turned off the television and made my rounds through the house, checking locks with more care than usual, those numbers followed me. By 10 o'clock, I found myself lying on my bed, fully dressed except for my shoes, staring at the ceiling fan as it cast shifting shadows across the walls. The digital clock on my nightstand glowed green in the darkness. 10:47, then 11:23, then 11:58. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Gary's face from Friday night. Not the apologetic voice from today's phone call, but the cold stranger who'd threatened me in my own kitchen. The son I'd raised would never have looked at me that way. But then again, the son I'd raised wouldn't have needed $25,000 from loan sharks either. I thought about the last time Gary had called me from a casino, 2 in the morning, his words slurred from whatever he'd been drinking. "Dad, I need a ride home. My truck won't start." When I'd arrived, I'd found him stumbling around the parking lot, his wallet empty and his pride nowhere to be found. He'd slept in my passenger seat the entire drive home, snoring like the little boy who used to fall asleep during long car trips to visit his grandmother. The boy who'd spent summer afternoons in my garage, handing me tools and asking endless questions about engines and carburetors. The teenager who'd proudly shown me his first paycheck from the hardware store. The young man who'd promised to make something of himself, to be better than the small-town life he'd inherited. When had that boy disappeared? When had gambling become more important than family? More important than self-respect? I got up and walked to the window, looking down at the street where Gary's truck had peeled out 3 nights ago. The pavement was empty now, lit only by the single streetlight at the corner. Somewhere out there, my son was planning something. I could feel it in my bones the way I used to sense storms coming across the farmland. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe today's phone call had been genuine. Maybe Hetty really had convinced him to change. to make an effort at rebuilding what we'd lost. She was a good woman, steady and practical in ways that Gary had never learned to be. If anyone could straighten him out, it would be her. I returned to the bed and picked up the framed photo from my nightstand. Gary at age 12, grinning gap-toothed next to the go-kart we'd built together in the garage. His hands were dirty with motor oil, and his eyes sparkled with the pure joy of accomplishment. That boy had believed anything was possible if you worked hard enough for it. Maybe some part of that boy still existed. Maybe Wednesday night's dinner would be the first step toward finding him again. The clock read 12:34, when I finally felt my eyelids growing heavy. I clutched the photo against my chest and let myself drift toward sleep, though an uncomfortable feeling I couldn't quite name continued to gnaw at the edges of my consciousness. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. For now, I had to try to trust that my son still existed somewhere inside the desperate man who'd stood in my kitchen demanding money. Sometimes you have to try. Sometimes trust is all a father has left. Tuesday morning found me standing at the kitchen sink with my coffee mug, staring out at the street through the window above the faucet. Sleep had been elusive after Monday night's phone call, my mind cycling between hope and skepticism like a broken record. Gary's voice had sounded so different, so earnest, but 38 years of watching my son had taught me to distinguish between genuine remorse and practiced performance. The unfamiliar truck caught my attention immediately. It sat parked where no vehicle usually belonged, across from Mrs. Henderson's mailbox, positioned with a clear view of my driveway. The morning dew still clung to its windshield, suggesting it had been there overnight. I'd noticed it yesterday evening when I'd stepped out to bring in the garbage cans, but assumed it belonged to someone visiting the neighborhood. Through the driver's side window, I could make out a figure hunched over the steering wheel. The man's fingers drummed nervously against the dashboard, and every few seconds he'd glance up and down the street as if checking for something or someone. I set my coffee down and walked outside, my boots crunching on the gravel driveway. The morning air was crisp, filled with the sounds of birds and the distant hum of traffic on the highway. As I approached the truck, I could see the man more clearly. Middle-aged, with thinning hair and the kind of pale complexion that suggested he spent most of his time indoors. Knocking gently on the driver's window, I waited as the man jumped slightly and rolled down the glass. His eyes were bloodshot, and there was a nervous energy about him that reminded me of a rabbit caught in headlights. "Morning," I said, keeping my tone friendly and neighborly. "Everything okay? I noticed you've been parked here since yesterday." "Oh, yes, sir. Everything's fine." The man's voice pitched slightly higher than seemed natural, and he avoided direct eye contact. "Just having some engine trouble. Waiting for it to cool down before I try starting her up again." I glanced at the truck's Virginia license plates, which struck me as odd for someone having car trouble in a Pennsylvania neighborhood. "Engine trouble? I've got some mechanical experience if you need a hand. Spent 40 years working on everything from farm equipment to pickup trucks." No, that's very kind of you, but I think it's more of an electrical issue. Or maybe the carburetor." He fumbled with his explanation, contradicting himself before the words were fully out of his mouth. "I've got a buddy coming to take a look at it later." The tools visible in the truck bed suggested he might actually know something about automotive repair, but his nervous demeanor told a different story. I could see him gripping the steering wheel tighter as our conversation continued, knuckles white against the worn vinyl. "Well, if you change your mind, I'm right across the street. Name's Wilbur Porter." I gestured toward my house, noting how his eyes followed the movement with intense interest. "There's a good mechanic shop about 2 miles down Route 15 if your buddy can't make it out." "That's real generous of you, Mr. Porter. Real generous." He seemed eager to end our conversation, already reaching for the window crank. "I'm sure we'll get it sorted out soon enough." "All right, then." I stepped back from the truck, but something about the entire interaction felt wrong. The man's explanation had been too detailed for someone with genuine car trouble, and his nervousness seemed disproportionate to a simple mechanical problem. "You take care now." Walking back toward my house, I found myself looking over my shoulder at the truck one more time. The man had already rolled up his window and was back to drumming his fingers on the dashboard, occasionally glancing at my property with what looked like calculated interest rather than casual observation. I finished my coffee standing by the kitchen window, watching the truck and trying to shake the feeling that I'd just been lied to by a complete stranger. The license plate number stuck in my mind, JKL 4729, though I couldn't say exactly why I felt it might be important to remember. By noon, when I went out to check the mail, the truck was gone. Wednesday arrived with the kind of spring weather that made everything seem possible. I'd spent most of the day alternating between anticipation and apprehension, the truck incident from yesterday morning fading to a background concern as evening approached. Gary's dinner invitation had consumed my thoughts, and despite my reservations, I found myself genuinely hoping this might be the beginning of something better between us. At 5:30, I began preparing for the evening. My navy blue suit came out of the closet, slightly worn at the elbows but still dignified enough for a family dinner. I polished my leather shoes until they reflected the bedroom light, selected a conservative tie, and checked my wallet to ensure I had enough cash should the evening call for it. From my small wine collection in the basement, I chose a bottle of Cabernet that had been waiting for a special occasion. The mirror reflected a man trying to look his best for his son, and the sight both pleased and saddened me. How long had it been since we'd shared a meal without tension? How many years since Gary had invited me anywhere without needing something in return? Stepping outside at 6 o'clock, I nearly collided with Elmer Jenkins, who was watering the flower bed that bordered our properties. His weathered face broke into a smile when he saw my formal attire. "Well now, don't you look sharp this evening, Wilbur? Special occasion?" Gary invited me to dinner. I held up the wine bottle with what I hoped was casual confidence. "First time in quite a while that we've done something like this." Elmer's expression softened with genuine warmth. "That's wonderful news. Family's the most important thing we've got, especially at our age. I'm glad to hear you two are working things out. We'll see how it goes." I appreciated his optimism, even if I couldn't fully share it. You know how these things can be. "I do indeed." He turned off his garden hose and leaned against the fence post. "But sometimes all it takes is someone extending a hand first. Sounds like Gary's trying to do that." The drive to Gary's neighborhood took me through the familiar streets of Riverside, across the bridge that spanned the narrow river the town was named for. I'd driven these roads countless times over the years, but tonight they seemed different somehow, like I was traveling towards something significant, rather than simply going from one place to another. Gary's new address led me into a subdivision I rarely visited, where the houses were newer and the lawns more manicured than in my older neighborhood. The homes here suggested a level of prosperity that surprised me, given Gary's recent financial troubles. How was he affording a place like this? 142 Maple Street turned out to be a blue house with white shutters, exactly as Gary had described. The lawn was neatly trimmed, and warm light glowed from the windows, creating the picture of domestic contentment. I parked behind a silver sedan that I assumed belonged to Hetty, taking a moment to check my appearance in the rearview mirror. The wine bottle felt heavier in my hand as I walked up the front path. Through the large picture window, I could see movement inside, figures preparing for my arrival. The porch light came on as I approached the door, and I realized Gary must have been watching for me. Taking a deep breath, I pressed the doorbell and waited. This was it, the moment when we'd discover whether my son's invitation had been genuine or just another performance in a long series of disappointments. The sound of footsteps approached from inside, quick and eager. The door opened before the bell had finished chiming. Gary's smile was so wide it looked painful, stretching across his face with an intensity that immediately put me on guard. Before I could fully step onto the porch, he'd pulled the door open completely and was reaching forward to shake my hand with both of his. "Dad, you made it. Right on time, just like always." His voice carried that same artificially cheerful tone from Monday's phone call, pitched slightly higher than his normal speaking voice. Come in, come in. Hetty's been cooking all afternoon." Hetty appeared beside him almost instantly, as if she'd been waiting just inside the doorway. Her hands fluttered nervously as she reached for the wine bottle, and I noticed they trembled slightly when she took it from me. "Mr. Porter, it's so good to see you. This is such a beautiful wine. You really didn't need to bring anything, but it's so thoughtful." The words tumbled out of her mouth in a breathless rush, and she clutched the bottle against her chest like a shield. The interior of the house struck me immediately as overly prepared. Every surface gleamed with fresh cleaning, and I could smell the lingering scent of furniture polish mixed with cooking aromas. Fresh flowers sat in a crystal vase on the coffee table, expensive-looking roses that seemed out of place in Gary's typically casual lifestyle. "Let me take your jacket, Dad." Gary was already behind me, helping me out of my suit coat with the kind of attentive service I'd never experienced from him before. "You look great, really sharp. That tie brings out your eyes." The dining room had been transformed into something resembling a magazine photograph. China plates I'd never seen before were arranged with mathematical precision, flanked by silverware that caught the light from multiple candles scattered across the table. The overall effect was beautiful, but it felt more like a stage set than a family dinner. "Gary tells me you haven't seen the house since we moved in," Hetty said, leading me toward the dining area. "We've done so much work on it. Gary's been incredibly handy with all the improvements." I followed her, noting how she avoided direct eye contact while speaking. Her movements were quick and efficient, but there was an underlying tension in the way she held her shoulders, as if she was bracing herself for something. The meal itself was impressive. Perfectly prepared steak, creamy mashed potatoes, and green beans that were still crisp. Everything was served on those unfamiliar china plates, and Gary made a show of opening my wine with a corkscrew that looked like it had been purchased specifically for the occasion. "A toast," Gary announced, raising his glass with theatrical flourish, "to second chances and family, to putting the past behind us and moving forward together." The wine was good, but I found myself studying my son's face as he drank. His eyes kept darting to his watch, quick glances that he probably thought I wouldn't notice. Each time he checked the time, his smile seemed to tighten slightly around the edges. "Tell me about your work, Gary." I cut into my steak, which was cooked exactly how I preferred it. "Things going better for you lately?" "Much better, Dad. Much better." He launched into a vague description of consulting work and new opportunities that sounded rehearsed and completely lacking in specifics. "I've really turned things around. Hetty can tell you. I'm a different person now." Hetty nodded enthusiastically, but her smile looked strained. "He's been working so hard, really dedicated to making positive changes." Her hands were busy throughout the conversation, constantly serving more food, refilling water glasses, and adjusting napkins that didn't need adjusting. The conversation felt choreographed, with both Gary and Hetty steering away from any topics that might lead to uncomfortable territory. When I asked about their finances or Gary's specific employment, the answers became even more evasive, filled with generalities and quick subject changes. "Remember when you taught me to change the oil in that old Buick?" Gary's laugh sounded forced as he launched into a carefully selected childhood memory. "I must have spilled more oil on the garage floor than actually made it into the engine." These shared recollections felt different from natural family reminiscing, too polished, too deliberately chosen to present Gary in the most favorable light possible. It was as if he'd prepared a mental list of safe, positive memories to deploy whenever the conversation threatened to veer toward recent difficulties. Throughout the meal, I became increasingly aware that I was watching a performance rather than participating in genuine family time. Both Gary and Hetty seemed to be working from a script, hitting predetermined emotional beats with the precision of actors who'd rehearsed their roles extensively. My phone rang as we were finishing the main course, its shrill tone cutting through Gary's story about potential business expansion opportunities. Both Gary and Hetty froze for a fraction of a second before Gary's expression shifted to forced casualness. "Go ahead and answer it, Dad. Don't mind us." But as I reached for the phone, I caught something in Gary's eyes, a flash of genuine panic that he couldn't quite hide behind his practiced smile. My phone's sharp ring sliced through the dinner conversation like a blade through silk. Gary's fork paused midway to his mouth, and Hetty's hands froze while reaching for the wine bottle. The sudden silence felt heavy, broken only by the continued ringing that seemed louder with each pulse. "Sorry, let me just check who this is." I reached into my jacket pocket, feeling the vibration against my fingers. The caller ID showed Elmer Jenkins, and I felt a small surge of warmth seeing my neighbor's name. "Go ahead and answer it, Dad. Don't mind us." Gary's voice carried that same artificial cheerfulness from earlier, but I caught something else underneath, a tightness that hadn't been there moments before. Elmer, what can I do for you? I stepped slightly away from the table, phone pressed to my ear, trying to maintain dinner etiquette while Gary and Hetty watched with expressions that seemed too carefully composed. Wilbur, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Elmer's familiar gravelly voice came through clearly, tinged with concern. I was just wondering, are you home tonight? I thought I saw your car in the driveway earlier, but now I'm not so sure. No, I'm actually at Gary's place for dinner. Why? Is everything okay? The words felt strange in my mouth, and I noticed Gary gripping his wineglass tighter, knuckles whitening against the crystal. There was a pause on Elmer's end, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a note of alarm that made my stomach clench. Wilbur, there are lights moving around inside your house. Not normal lights. Flashlight beams, like someone searching through rooms. I've been watching for about 10 minutes now. The fork slipped from Gary's fingers, clattering against his plate with a sound that seemed to echo through the suddenly quiet dining room. Hetty's face had gone pale, and she was clutching the wine bottle like an anchor. What do you mean, lights moving around? My voice sounded distant to my own ears, as if someone else was speaking the words. Are you certain? Dead certain. I was out checking my mailbox when I noticed them. First in your living room, then the kitchen. Now they're upstairs. Whoever it is, they're being systematic about it. Should I call the police? The room around me seemed to tilt slightly, and I felt my free hand instinctively reach for my car keys in my pocket. Yes, call the police. I'm coming home right now. Be careful, Wilbur. I don't know if they're still inside or not. I'll keep watching from my window until you get here. I ended the call and looked up to find Gary and Hetty staring at me with expressions that would have been comical under different circumstances. Gary's mouth hung slightly open, and Hetty was still holding dishes she'd been clearing, frozen like a statue. Someone's in my house, I announced, already moving toward where I'd left my jacket. I need to get home right now. Gary's response came too quickly, his laughter pitched too high and too loud for the small dining room. Oh, come on, Dad. Old Elmer's probably just seeing tree shadows or something. You know how he gets. Always thinking he's still on guard duty from his army days. The dismissive tone in my son's voice struck me wrong, especially coming so fast after Elmer's worried call. I paused in putting on my jacket, studying Gary's face in the flickering candlelight. His smile looked strained, and there was something desperate in his eyes. Elmer's not confused, Gary. He knows the difference between shadows and flashlight beams moving through a house. I pulled my jacket on fully, checking that my keys were secure. Someone's robbing my home while I'm sitting here eating dinner. Dad, please. Hetty's voice was barely above a whisper, and her hands were trembling as she set down the dishes she'd been holding. Maybe there's some explanation. But I was already moving toward the front door, my mind racing with thoughts of what might be happening to my belongings, my memories, everything I'd worked for over the years. The timing felt wrong, too convenient, but I pushed that thought aside in favor of getting home to assess the situation. Gary rose from his chair so quickly it nearly toppled backward, his face shifting from fake concern to something that looked almost like panic. Gary's movement to block my path was swift but clumsy, his desperation finally breaking through the careful facade he'd maintained all evening. His hands came up in what might have been meant as a casual gesture, but his body language screamed panic. Whoa, hold on there, Dad. You're getting all worked up over nothing. His laughter rang false in the small space, echoing off the walls with an edge of hysteria. Elmer's 72 years old. The man probably can't see his own hand in front of his face at night. I stopped moving toward the door, not because Gary's words made sense, but because something in his tone reminded me of the boy who used to lie about broken windows and missing cookies. The same overeager explanations, the same desperate need to be believed, despite obvious evidence to the contrary. Gary, move aside. I kept my voice level but firm. Elmer's eyesight is fine, and he's not the type to call about shadows. Someone is in my house. Look, okay, maybe he did see something. Gary repositioned himself more squarely between me and the door, his hands now openly placed on my shoulders, in a gesture that felt more restraining than comforting. But think about it logically. If someone was really robbing houses, wouldn't they pick a time when people aren't having dinner? Wouldn't they case the place first to make sure nobody's around? The words hit me strangely, too specific and knowledgeable for someone trying to reassure a worried father. I looked up at my son's face and saw something I'd never seen before, the cold calculation of someone who knew exactly what was happening and was desperate to prevent me from discovering it. How do you know they didn't case the place? The question came out before I could stop it, and I watched Gary's expression flicker with something that might have been fear. I don't. That's what criminals do, right? They plan these things out. His grip on my shoulders tightened, and I realized he was physically preventing me from moving forward. Dad, please. Let's just finish dinner and then drive over together. I'll come with you to check everything out. Behind Gary, Hetty had gone completely still, a dish towel clutched in her white-knuckled hands. When our eyes met, she looked away immediately, but not before I caught the guilt written across her features as clearly as if she'd confessed aloud. Get out of my way, son. The words came out harder than I'd intended, carrying decades of parental authority that Gary had always responded to as a child. I'm going to check on my house, now. Dad, you're being unreasonable. Think about this rationally. Rationally? I stepped closer to him, close enough to see the sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool evening air. Rationally would be trusting my neighbor's word over the protests of a son who's lied to me more times than I can count. Gary's face flushed red, and for a moment I thought he might actually strike me. Instead, he moved even more directly into my path, using his size advantage to create a wall between me and the exit. You're not going anywhere until we talk this through properly. His voice had dropped to a tone I'd never heard from him before. Cold, threatening, nothing like the desperate boy who'd sat in my kitchen 5 days ago begging for money. Gary William Porter. I used his full name the way I had when he was a child and had crossed a line that demanded immediate correction. You will step aside and let me leave this house right now. Or what? You'll call the cops on your own son? He was breathing heavily, and I could smell the wine on his breath, mixed with something that might have been fear. You'll destroy our family over some old man's paranoid fantasies? But even as he spoke, I saw his eyes dart to the front door, then to his watch, then to Hetty. The pattern was too specific to be casual anxiety. He was tracking time, measuring it against something else, something that required me to stay exactly where I was for a predetermined period. It's not paranoid if someone's actually in my house, Gary. I took a step forward, testing his resolve. And if you don't let me pass, I'm going to start wondering why my own son is so determined to keep me away from home on the exact night someone decides to rob it. The accusation hung in the air between us like poison gas, and I watched my son's face go through a series of micro-expressions. Shock, guilt, anger, and finally a desperate sort of resignation that told me everything I needed to know. Gary's hand shot forward and twisted the deadbolt with a sharp, metallic click that echoed through the hallway like a gunshot. The sound seemed to hang in the air between us, final and unmistakable in its meaning. He pocketed the key with deliberate slowness, his eyes never leaving mine. You're not leaving, Dad. Not until we figure this out. The simple statement carried more menace than any threat he could have made. I stared at my son, this stranger wearing Gary's face, and felt something cold settle in my chest. The boy I'd raised was gone, replaced by someone capable of locking his own father in a house while accomplices ransacked the family home. Gary! My voice was steady, though my heart hammered against my ribs. Unlock that door right now. I can't do that. He leaned back against the door, arms crossed, no longer bothering to maintain even the pretense of concern. Not until you calm down and listen to reason. Behind him, Hetty had pressed herself against the dining room wall, the dish towel still clutched in her hands. Her face showed the kind of horror that comes from watching someone you thought you knew transform into someone unrecognizable. Listen to reason. I kept my voice calm, though every instinct screamed at me to force my way past him. Son, you just locked me in your house against my will while someone robs mine. What possible reason could justify that? You don't understand the situation you're in. Gary's tone carried a warning that made my skin crawl. There are people involved in this that you don't want to cross. People who don't forgive debts or accept excuses. The admission hit me like a physical blow. Not just that Gary had planned this, but that he was willing to sacrifice his own father to solve problems he'd created through his gambling addiction. I thought about the 25,000 he'd demanded, about the cold look in his eyes when I'd refused, about his promise that I'd regret my decision. "I need to use the bathroom," I said quietly. Gary's expression shifted to suspicion, but basic human decency, or perhaps the last remnants of his upbringing, prevented him from refusing outright. "Fine, but don't try anything stupid." The bathroom was at the back of the house, and I knew from previous visits that it had a window facing the backyard. As I closed the door behind me, I could hear Gary and Hetty talking in hushed, urgent voices in the hallway. Their words were indistinct, but the tone was pure panic. The window was older than I'd remembered, with a simple latch that opened easily despite years of paint buildup. The screen came away with minimal noise, and I found myself looking down at a drop of perhaps 6 feet into Hetty's flower bed. Not ideal for a 68-year-old man, but manageable if I was careful. Getting through the window required more flexibility than I'd possessed in years, but desperation provided both motivation and strength. I landed heavily in the soft earth of the garden, dirt staining my dinner clothes and small branches catching at my jacket. The impact sent a shock through my knees, but nothing felt broken. Behind me I could hear Gary's voice getting louder, more agitated. How long before he realized what had happened? How long before he discovered the open window and empty bathroom? My car sat in the driveway where I'd left it, keys still in my jacket pocket. The engine turned over smoothly, and I backed out of the driveway with careful precision, not wanting to alert the neighbors to anything unusual. It wasn't until I was several blocks away that I allowed myself to fully process what had just occurred. My own son had betrayed me, not just refused to help, not just lied or manipulated, but actively orchestrated a crime against me while pretending to offer reconciliation. The dinner, the apologies, Hetty's nervousness, all of it had been theater designed to keep me away from my house while it was being robbed. The drive back to my neighborhood passed in a blur of familiar streets and unfamiliar emotions. Anger, betrayal, and a deep sadness that felt like grief for the son I'd thought I knew. But underneath all of that was something else. A cold determination that Gary had inherited from me along with his mother's eyes and my stubborn streak. He'd made a mistake in letting me discover his plan, an even bigger mistake in underestimating what his old man was capable of when pushed too far. I'd spent 40 years working with my hands, solving problems and dealing with difficult people. My son was about to learn that some lessons come too late to do any good. As I turned onto my street, I could see police lights flashing in the distance, red and blue reflections dancing off the windows of neighboring houses. Elmer had kept his word and called the authorities. Now I needed to get home and find out exactly what my son and his accomplice had stolen from me. More importantly, I needed to decide what I was going to do about it. Red and blue lights painted my street in alternating colors as I turned the corner, my heart sinking as I realized the police cars were clustered directly in front of my house. The scene looked like something from a television drama. Multiple patrol vehicles, officers moving with purpose, and neighbors gathered at respectful distances, their faces reflecting the kind of morbid curiosity that comes with unexpected neighborhood excitement. I parked quickly behind the last police car and hurried toward my front door, where Officer Ted Miller was coordinating what appeared to be the tail end of an investigation. Through the rear window of one patrol car, I could see a slumped figure in handcuffs, head down in the universal posture of defeat. "Mr. Porter," Officer Miller approached me with the kind of professional calm that suggested he'd been expecting my arrival. "I'm glad you're here. We've got your burglar in custody, and your neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, has been extremely helpful in providing details about the incident." Elmer was right. The words came out as relief rather than surprise. I looked toward Elmer's house and saw him standing by his fence, arms crossed with the satisfied expression of a man whose instincts had been vindicated. Someone really was in my house. Yes, sir, they were. We apprehended the suspect in your basement, attempting to access what appears to be a safe. He's confessed to breaking and entering, and he's also provided some additional information that I think you'll find disturbing. Officer Miller guided me toward the patrol car, where the burglar sat hunched in the back seat. Through the window, I could see a thin, pale man in his 40s, the same nervous individual I'd spoken to yesterday morning, when he'd been sitting in that truck across from Mrs. Henderson's mailbox. His name is Otis Raines. Ring any bells? I spoke to him yesterday. He claimed to have car trouble. The memory felt surreal now, knowing I'd offered help to someone who was planning to rob me. He seemed nervous, but I thought he was just stressed about his truck. According to Mr. Raines, he was hired to commit this burglary. He's been very forthcoming about the details, probably hoping for a reduced sentence. Officer Miller's expression grew more serious. Mr. Porter, he claims your son Gary arranged this entire operation. The words hit me like a physical blow, even though some part of me had been expecting them since the moment I'd realized Gary was preventing me from leaving his house. Hearing it confirmed by law enforcement made it undeniably real. Gary hired him to rob my house while I was at dinner. The statement came out flat, emotionless, as my mind struggled to process the full extent of my son's betrayal. That's what he's telling us. Says Gary promised him $5,000 to get into your safe and retrieve $25,000 in cash. When we arrested him, he immediately started talking about how Gary had set up the dinner invitation specifically to keep you away from the house during the burglary. I walked closer to the patrol car and looked directly at Otis Raines. When he finally raised his eyes to meet mine, I saw shame and fear, but no real remorse. This was a man who'd been caught, not one who regretted his actions. "Did you get into the safe?" I asked Officer Miller, though I was still staring at the burglar. "No, sir. Your basement door was locked, and by the time he got it open, Mr. Jenkins had already called us. He fled back upstairs when he heard our sirens, but we had the house surrounded. The safe shows tool marks where he attempted to force it, but it held secure. We walked down to my basement, where I could see the evidence of Otis's failed attempt. My old Mosler safe, installed by my father 40 years ago, stood intact, despite obvious signs of tampering. Tools were scattered around it, a crowbar, screwdrivers, what looked like a small drill, evidence of desperation rather than professional expertise. "Everything appears to be undisturbed," Officer Miller said, making notes on a clipboard, "but we'll need you to check thoroughly once we've finished processing the scene." Back outside, Elmer approached with the measured stride of a man who'd been proven absolutely right about something important. His handshake was firm, his eyes bright with the satisfaction of a job well done. "I told you that truck looked suspicious," he said, allowing himself a small smile. "Been watching that Raines character since Tuesday morning. Something about him just didn't sit right. Too nervous, too interested in your house specifically. You saved my life savings, Elmer, if you hadn't called when you did." I trailed off, not wanting to think about what $25,000 would have meant to my retirement security. Any neighbor would have done the same thing. But his pride was evident and well-deserved. The important thing now is making sure this doesn't happen again, and making sure everyone involved faces appropriate consequences. Officer Miller approached us again, his expression grave. "Mr. Porter, we're heading to your son's house now to place him under arrest. Given Mr. Raines's confession and the evidence we've gathered, we have enough for charges of conspiracy to commit burglary, among other things. I need to ask, do you want to press full charges against your son?" I looked back at my house, thinking about the violation of trust, the elaborate deception, the cold calculation required to rob your own father. Then I looked at Elmer, who'd risked his own safety to protect me and my property. "Yes." The word came out hard and final. "I want full charges pressed against Gary Porter, and against anyone else involved in this conspiracy." The drive to Gary's neighborhood felt different this time, not the hopeful journey of a father seeking reconciliation, but the grim procession of justice finally catching up with deception. I followed the police convoy at a respectful distance, watching the red and blue lights reflect off house windows as we moved through the quiet streets of Riverside. Gary's house was blazing with lights when we arrived, every window illuminated as if he was trying to push back the darkness that was closing in around him. Through the large picture window, I could see frantic movement. Gary pacing like a caged animal, Hetty moving between rooms with what looked like suitcases in her hands. Officer Miller positioned his units strategically around the house, professional and methodical in creating a perimeter that would prevent any escape attempt. I parked across the street, close enough to witness justice, but far enough to stay out of the way of police operations. The front door opened before Officer Miller could knock. Hetty stood in the doorway, her face pale and drawn, looking like someone who'd been crying for hours. Behind her, Gary was visible, his earlier confidence completely evaporated, replaced by the desperate expression of a man whose careful plans had collapsed completely. "Mrs. Porter, we have a warrant for your husband's arrest." Officer Miller's voice carried easily across the quiet street, professional but firm. "Is Gary Porter inside?" "He's here." Hetty's voice was barely audible, but she stepped aside to allow the officer's entry. "He's been expecting you." Gary appeared in the doorway, no longer the manipulative son who'd tried to charm me into compliance just hours earlier. His shirt was rumpled, his hair disheveled, and his hands shook visibly as Officer Miller began reading his rights. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." "This is ridiculous." Gary's voice cracked as the handcuffs clicked into place. "You're destroying a family over some old man's paranoid fantasies. My father doesn't know what he's talking about." "Gary William Porter, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit burglary, solicitation of criminal activity, and conspiracy to commit theft." Officer Miller's tone remained professional, despite Gary's protests. "Your accomplice has provided detailed testimony about your role in planning and financing this operation." "Accomplice? What accomplice? I don't know what you're talking about." But even as Gary denied everything, his eyes darted toward the patrol cars, and I knew he was looking for Otis Raines, hoping against hope that his hired burglar hadn't betrayed him. Hetty stood in the doorway, watching her husband's arrest with an expression that combined horror and resignation. When Gary looked to her for support, she took a deliberate step backward, distancing herself both physically and emotionally from the man she'd married. "Hetty, tell them this is crazy. Tell them I was with you all evening." Gary's voice was rising to a desperate pitch. "You know I didn't do anything wrong. I know you locked your father in our house." Her voice was quiet but clear enough for everyone to hear. "I know you hired someone to rob him while you kept him away from home. I know you planned this whole thing because he wouldn't give you money for your gambling debts." The admission hung in the air like a confession in church, final and damning. Gary's face went white, then red, then white again as he realized his own wife was refusing to provide him with an alibi. "You don't understand what you're doing." He struggled against the handcuffs as officers guided him toward the patrol car. "There are people involved in this that you can't protect me from. If I can't pay them back, they'll—" "Then you should have thought of that before you tried to steal from your own father," Hetty interrupted, her voice gaining strength, "before you turned our marriage into part of your criminal schemes." As Gary was placed in the back of the patrol car, I could see him through the window, still talking desperately to anyone who would listen, still trying to manipulate his way out of consequences he'd brought entirely upon himself. But the door closed on his protests, and suddenly the street was quiet again except for the radio chatter of police communications. Officer Miller approached my car as the convoy prepared to leave. "We'll need you to come to the station tomorrow to finalize your statement, Mr. Porter. But the case is solid. Between Mr. Raines's confession and Mrs. Porter's corroboration, your son will be facing serious charges." I nodded, watching the patrol car containing Gary disappear around the corner. 38 years of fatherhood, and it had come to this. My son handcuffed in the back of a police car, facing prison time for trying to rob his own father. The neighborhood slowly returned to normal as the police cars departed, porch lights dimming and curtains falling back into place. But for the Porter family, nothing would ever be normal again. 2 days had passed since the arrests, and Friday afternoon found me sitting on my front porch with Elmer, sharing a quiet beer and watching the neighborhood settle into its weekend rhythm. The media attention had faded, the police tape had been removed, and life in Riverside was returning to its comfortable predictability. "Court called this morning," I told Elmer, taking a sip from my can and enjoying the simple pleasure of peaceful conversation. "Gary got 5 years probation, full restitution, and 500 hours of community service. Judge said the family nature of the crime was an aggravating factor, not a mitigating one." Elmer nodded approvingly. "Sounds about right. What about the other fellow, Raines?" 2 years in county prison, Judge wasn't as lenient with him, being a repeat offender and all. I looked across the street where the empty space in front of Mrs. Henderson's house reminded me of where this whole drama had started. Funny thing is, I almost feel sorry for Gary. Almost. Almost counts for something, I suppose. Elmer set down his beer and leaned back in his chair. Shows you're still his father, even after everything that happened. The conversation lapsed into comfortable silence, the kind that only comes between friends who've been through something significant together. Elmer had become more than just a neighbor over the past few days. He'd proven himself to be the kind of person you want living next door when trouble comes calling. "I keep thinking about that Tuesday morning," Elmer said eventually. "Something about that truck just bothered me, you know? Couldn't put my finger on it at first, but it was like watching someone case a house in broad daylight." "Your instincts were spot on. If you hadn't been paying attention, if you hadn't called when you did." I shook my head, not wanting to dwell on what might have happened. "Those savings represent 40 years of work, Elmer. My entire retirement fund was in that safe. Well, it's still there, and that's what matters." He gestured toward my house with obvious satisfaction. "And now you know your home security is solid. That old safe of your father's proved its worth." I'd spent the previous day upgrading my security system, installing motion sensors, and improving the locks on my doors and windows. Not out of paranoia, but out of practical acknowledgement that trust, once broken, needed to be rebuilt gradually and with appropriate precautions. "Heard from Hetty yesterday," I mentioned, knowing Elmer would be interested in the aftermath. "She's filing for divorce. Said she can't be married to someone who'd victimize his own family for gambling money." "Smart woman. She seemed like she was caught in the middle of something she never signed up for." Elmer's tone was sympathetic. "Any word on whether Gary's getting help for his gambling problem?" "Court-mandated counseling is part of his probation. Whether it takes or not—" I shrugged, trying to balance hope with realism. "I suppose that's up to him now. I can't fix him, and I can't keep enabling him by bailing him out of trouble." The afternoon sun was warm on my face, and for the first time in days I felt truly relaxed. The crisis was over, justice had been served, and life could move forward. Not the same as before. Trust, once shattered, leaves permanent scars, but forward nonetheless. "You know what the strangest part of all this was?" I asked Elmer. "That dinner on Wednesday night. Sitting there, watching Gary and Hetty perform like actors in a play, knowing something felt wrong but not being able to identify what it was." "Parental instincts," Elmer said simply. "You raised that boy, so you know when he's being genuine and when he's putting on an act. The problem was, you wanted to believe he'd changed." "Exactly. I wanted to believe it so badly that I ignored the evidence right in front of me." I finished my beer and set the empty can on the small table between our chairs. "Won't make that mistake again. Doesn't mean you stop hoping, though. Just means you hope with your eyes open." As evening approached, neighbors began emerging for their usual weekend activities. Lawn care, dog walking, the general bustle of community life. Mrs. Henderson waved from her garden, and the Johnson kids rode their bicycles past my house, their laughter echoing off the quiet street. This was what Gary had tried to steal from me, I realized. Not just money, but the security that comes from knowing you can age in place, surrounded by people who care about your welfare. Elmer's vigilance had protected more than just my savings. It had preserved the peace of mind that makes retirement possible. "Thank you," I said to Elmer, the words carrying more weight than casual conversation, "for watching out for me, for trusting your instincts, for being the kind of neighbor everyone deserves." Elmer smiled, the expression mixing pride with genuine affection. "That's what neighbors do, Wilbur. We watch out for each other." He gestured toward the empty street where Otis's truck had once sat. Besides, it felt good to put those old Army observation skills to use for something worthwhile. The sun was setting behind the houses across the street, painting everything in golden light that suggested peaceful endings and new beginnings. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought, but tonight I was exactly where I belonged, on my own front porch, with a friend who'd proven himself when it mattered most, in a neighborhood that had shown its true character when tested. Justice had been served, community had been preserved, and trust, though modified by experience, remained possible between people who earned it honestly. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.